special meeting. It's December 10th, 2018, a special meeting of the Taos County Board of Commissioners. We welcome everyone here today. I hereby call this meeting to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Chairman Vigil.
Present.
Vice Chair Gagos. Let's give you a answer. Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Present.
Commissioner O'Donnell. Present.
If everyone would please stand. I ask Sheriff Holbrook to please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Commissioners, next is the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, second with the option to take a site visit, both locations if necessary.
Is that part of your motion?
Yes, it is.
No, you seconded it, Commissioner Blakeman's motion.
Well, my motion is just to approve the agenda as is. Suppose during deliberations, we can, somebody can make a motion for a site visit.
So the motion is that the agenda be approved with a second, and the conditions were not accepted.
We can make a motion at any time to go into a site visit, but we may not choose to go to a site visit, and I don't want to make it part of the approval of the agenda.
So I'll second the motion to approve the agenda. Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yes.
Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Yes.
Vice Chair Gagos. Chairman Vigil.
Yes. Item 5 is public hearing. The first one being discussion and consideration on the appeal of the Taos County Planning Commission decision regarding the revocation of the ability of Mr. Stephen R. Vigil doing business as Protégé excavation from storing heavy equipment associated with the cottage industry located at 123C New Mexico State Road 240. These matters may also be discussed in executive session under the Open Meetings Act exemption 10-15-1H3, which allows for deliberations of the public body in connection with administrative adjudicatory proceeding. There are rules and regulations of the public hearing that will be strictly adhered to here. At some point in the hearing, Mr. Vigil will have me read the appeal hearing procedures, and also to let the crowd know we do not accept cat calls and comments when you're not being recognized by the chair. The sheriff will be here to keep this meeting orderly, and we appreciate that you are here today, but we ask that respect of the meeting be shown by both sides of the appeals today. So at this time, I will turn it over to Mr. Ed Vigil, our planning director, regarding the first public hearing. Good morning, Mr. Vigil. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm fine, thank you. How are you this morning?
Pretty good.
Commissioners, Mr. Cordova, Mr. Alto, staff, members of the public. The first thing that, before I begin my brief presentation here, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would like to advise members of the public, anyone wishing to speak for or against the two items on the agenda today, there are sign-in sheets on my table here, usually to my right, if anybody wants to sign in.
And they're labeled on the top, which one?
That is correct. That is correct. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Stephen R. Vigil, doing business as Protégé Excavation, the appellant, appeals the September 12, 2018 decision of the Taos County Planning Commission, the decision which was filed for record in the office of the Taos County Clerk on September 26, 2018. The decision upheld the decision of the Planning Director and revokes the ability of Mr. Stephen R. Vigil, doing business as Protégé Excavation, from storing heavy equipment associated with the cottage industry located at 123C, New Mexico State Road 240. As per Ordinance 2015-2, the Taos County Land Use Regulations, Sections 3.4.2 revocation, suspension, extension, transferability, and duration. Letter A, notice of non-compliance, effective August 28, 2018, where the conditions of approval of a permit have not been or are not being complied with, or the terms of any law, ordinance, or violating connection therewith. The planning director gave notice, written notice, to Stephen R. Vigil, doing business as Protégé Excavation, of the county's intention to revoke the storage of heavy equipment associated with the cottage industry approval of Protégé Excavation dating back to 2008 at 123 C State Road 240. The site is located approximately 1.2 miles west of the New Mexico State Road 68 and New Mexico State Road 240 intersection off of New Mexico State Road 240 in the Cordillera area, Taos County, New Mexico. The proposed project is further described as lying within Section 31, Township of 25 North, a range of 12 east, and is further described as lying within the Quijosa Grant. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I offer into the record all the information that the Planning Commission used to make their determination, and because today's public hearing is a de novo standard of review, relevant new evidence as per Section 9.1.2 of Ordinance 2018-2 is also being offered into the record as follows. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, you have been provided with Exhibit Number 1, which is Book 1, and this is the 3-ring binder. This is a 3-ring binder, whereas pages 1 through 61, evidence to support the notice of appeal, which is the new relevant evidence. Pages 62 to 205, all copies of the record of the Planning Commission hearing of September 12, 2018. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I also want to make reference to the September 12 DVDs that were included for your review as well. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, under Exhibit 2, I would like to offer into the record the second book, Book 2, containing the following. A copy of Section 9.2 of Ordinance 2018-2, the Appeal Hearing Procedures. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, you have made reference to these appeal hearing procedures, and I will give you directions so that it would be appropriate to read those into the record in just a couple minutes. Number 2 would be the notice of the public hearing. Number 3 is the Planning Director's response, essentially the staff report to appellant's appeal of decision of the Planning Commission. Number 4, decision of Planning Commission dated September 12, 2018, filed for record on September 26, 2018. Number 5, notice of appeal of decision of the Planning Commission received October 26, 2018. Number 6, copy of Ordinance 2018-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations, home occupation definition, Section 3.4.2, permit revocation, suspension, extension, transferability, and duration, notice of non-compliance, and Section 4.8.2, home occupation standards. Mr. Chairman, number 6 is included into the record as a new item as allowed in the Land Use Code as a de novo hearing. Number 7, Mr. Chairman, number 7, copy of the Taos News legal advertisement published November 16, 2018. Number 8, copy of legal notice of public hearing from the Taos News. Number 9, copy of receipt payment from the Taos News. Number 10, affidavit from appellant affirming notice to adjacent property owners on November 14, 2018. Number 11, copy of photograph affirming posting of the property. Number 12, aerial imagery of the subject property as follows. Letter A, 2009. Letter B, 2010. Letter C, 2011. Letter D, 2013. Letter E, 2016. And letter F, 2017. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, if you would just grant me just a couple of minutes, I'd like to offer this into the record and present this to the County Clerk. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I will refer you to Book 2, the red or the blue one in your case, the blue book, and I would refer you to effectively tab 2, I believe, which would be the Planning Director's response to appeal a decision of Planning Commission. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, at the September 12, 2018 meeting of the Taos County Planning Commission, the Taos County Planning Commission found, and again this is attached to the decision of the Planning Commission, that Mr. Steve Vigil doing business as Protégé Excavation is in violation of the definition of cottage industry as defined in Ordinance 2005-10, Taos County Land Use Regulations, the land use regulations which were in effect when Mr. Vigil's cottage industry was approved on or about March 26th of 2008. The Taos County Planning Commission found 9 findings as the basis for concluding that Mr. Vigil doing business as Protégé Excavation is in violation of the definition of cottage industry, thus denying the reinstatement of the ability to store equipment associated with Protégé Excavation at 123C State Road 240. An appeal of a decision made by the Planning Commission was filed with the Planning Department and recorded with the County Clerk on October 25th, 2018, accompanied by the non-refundable fee of $200. It is the Planning Director's determination that the appellants have satisfactorily complied with the applicable requirements of Section 9.1.2 Appeals of Decision of the Planning Commission of Ordinance 2018-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations, and the public hearing may proceed. In accordance with Section 9.1.2 letter G, the Planning Director is presenting the appeal to the Board of County Commissioners within 45 days of the receipt of a notice of appeal. October 25th, 2018, date of public hearing, December 10th, 2018, 45 days of receipt of the notice of appeal. Appeals of decisions of the Planning Commission shall be heard by the Board of County Commissioners de novo as per Section 9.1.2 letter A of Ordinance 2018-2 Taos County Land Use Regulations. As a de novo hearing standard of review, relevant new evidence shall be allowed. In addition, the parties in the Planning Department may present relevant parts of the record to the Board of County Commissioners, and such evidence shall be considered de novo. Relevant evidence submitted by the public may also be considered. The Board of County Commissioners will need to determine whether or not the conditions of the permit have not been or are not being complied with, in this case, the cottage industry, or the terms of any law or ordinance are violated in connection therewith as per Section 3.4.2, permit revocation, suspension, extension, transferability, and duration, letter A, notice of non-compliance of Ordinance 2018-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations, and or 3.4.2, letter A of Ordinance 2015-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations. In this case, the definition of cottage industry as defined in Ordinance 2005-10 of Taos County Land Use Regulations, and whether or not you reinstate with or without additional conditions or revoke the ability of Mr. Vigil to store equipment associated with his business, Protégé Excavation, at 123C New Mexico State Road 240. The definition of a cottage industry as per Ordinance 2005-10 Taos County Land Use Regulations is a small, individually owned business or concern located in a generally residential area which functions without altering the residential character of the neighborhood and which does not create any significant impacts on the public health, safety, and general welfare, and which employs no more than 5 persons, not members of the immediate family. In addition, the family members in the business are concerned. Additionally, the cottage industry is customarily carried out or carried on as an accessory use of a dwelling unit, is carried on in a dwelling unit or in a building or other structure which is accessory to a dwelling unit and clearly incidental and secondary to the use of the dwelling unit for residential purposes. In accordance with Section 9.1.2 letter F of Ordinance 2018-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations, the appellant created all copies of the record that is being presented to the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners, in their discretion, may deliberate in executive session, but the final action shall occur in open meeting. As per section 9.1.2 letter H, the Board of County Commissioners must file its decision with the county clerk within 30 calendar days of the conclusion of the hearing. Applicable procedural rules for the public hearing will be as per section 9.2.1 of ordinance 2018-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations. The appeal hearing procedures establish uniform hearing procedures for appeal hearings before the Board of Adjustment, the Planning Commission, and the Board of County Commissioners, and shall be observed as follows, letters A through L. Mr. Chairman, you have been provided with a copy of section 9.2.1 with discretion to amend for good cause by the chairperson. Mr. Chairman, you may now proceed to read the rules of procedure identified within section 9.2.1A through L of ordinance 2018-2 Taos County Land Use Regulations into the record, which establish the appeal hearing procedures. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I will respectfully ask to reserve my opportunity or my ability to read the section below in my staff report as the Planning Department's presentation as per section 9.2.1 letter D at the appropriate time at the appeal hearing procedures. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners.
Okay, at this time I'll read the appeal hearing procedures as stated, A through L. This is uniform procedures at appeal hearings before the Board of Adjustment, which is or the Planning Commission or the Board of County Commissioners, and it shall be observed as follows with discretion to amend for good cause by the chairperson. Item A, appellant shall speak first. The appellant shall have reasonable amount of time as determined by reviewing the body's chairperson in which to present the appellate's position. Item B, the appellee shall have reasonable amount of time as determined by the reviewing of the body's chairperson in which to present the appellee's response. Item C, members of the public shall have reasonable amount of time as determined by the reviewing body's chairperson in which to comment and present relevant evidence. Item D, Planning Department shall make its presentation. Item E, appellee shall have reasonable amount of time as determined by the reviewing body's chairperson to reply to the Planning Department's presentation or to any comments or evidence presented by the public. Item F, appellant shall be allotted a reasonable amount of time to reply as determined by the reviewing body's chairperson. Item G, speakers shall be sworn in by a notary public and cross-examination or questions by the party staff or reviewing board will be allowed. Cross-examination or questions shall not be allowed by one party, not a party of the appeal. Item H, time allotted to speakers shall be monitored by a county staff person. Item I, the chairperson shall have the right to prevent repetitive statements by asking any speaker who is being repetitive to end his or her remarks and if appropriate, leave the podium or the floor. Item J, the chairperson shall have the right to take any and all appropriate actions to ensure appeal hearings are orderly and equitably conducted so that all persons having a right to speak shall have the opportunity to do so. Only the speaker having the floor shall be allowed to speak. Members of the public attending the hearing shall not speak, comment, disrupt when another has been given the floor by the chairperson. Item K, the chairperson shall enforce the rules and may at his option appoint a sergeant at arms to assist in enforcing these rules. Item L, the reviewing body in its discretion may deliberate in an executive session, but final action shall occur in open meeting. At this time, under item K, I appoint Sheriff Jerry Hogarth as sergeant at arms for this public hearing. Mr. Vigil, that is from section 9.2.1, the appeal hearing procedures.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. You may proceed with letter A on that procedure.
Mr. Vigil or his agent.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, if I may, before I yield the podium to Mr. Vigil, I would just like to clarify for the record that Mr. Vigil and I are not related. Thank you.
Gotta love small towns, right? Good morning, Mr. Vigil, how are you?
Good morning. Good, how are you?
Do you swear and affirm under oath and penalty of lawful perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual?
Yes, ma'am.
Please state your name.
Stephen R. Vigil, Jr. I would hope we're not going to need to inform me on this one. Good morning. I guess to start off, I'd like to say thank you all for being here again. If you guys remember me from 2016, we were going for a special use permit at 35 Camino at Caballo. That building is a 5,000 square foot building. It's in a neighborhood. I want to keep the confusion from anyone in the public. This hearing is not about that property. This hearing is about my home, which is located at 123C State Road 240. We've been operating out of that location since 2008. We were, at the time, I was working for UPS full-time, and I had a backhoe and a dump truck and an excavator and a few other pieces of equipment. In all, I want to say about 10 pieces of equipment between semis, trailers, backhoes, had a small bulldozer, had a small excavator. But the way I started my business is I worked at UPS full-time, and then on the weekends and my time off, I would go and get more work. And since I was young, growing up, my family, my grandfather, my uncle, my father, my uncles have always been, around heavy equipment, around whether they were in custom farming, whether they had a trucking company, an excavation company, a gravel pit. And that's where the business name Protégé Excavation comes from, as it's giving back respect and from the people that I learned from and that taught me. And not just family members, also people in the community that helped me along the way. So that's how this started as a cottage industry, as I'm sure everyone in the audience and then also the commissioners are kind of wondering, how this got to be this way. So under the land use regulations in 2005, which Mr. Vigil earlier stated that I no longer comply under, at the time in 2008, when I started my company, I did comply under those regulations. It was me and my dad. My dad actually worked for Keith Randall. My dad didn't work for me at the time. And it was just me, and then as I needed help on the side, my dad would help me when he could. So starting with one employee, whether there's one piece of equipment or 10 pieces of equipment, it's one employee, and I did comply with those regulations of 2005. So I did want to state that. As the years went on, a long story short, in 2012, I got so busy with the excavation that I decided to quit UPS. And many people said, you got to be crazy leaving a job like that to go in business on your own. Well, I loved excavation. It's still in my blood, and that's what I decided to do. And I was, at the time, very successful. Well, since then, the company did grow, and as the company grows, you buy more equipment. And a lot of that equipment isn't always used all the time. If you guys know, from Silva's, Joey Perovich, Gilby Hill, a lot of them have gravel pits. A lot of them have lots of pieces of equipment. If a machine breaks down, they can go get an axle or they can go get a spring and, fix stuff on the spot. That's not the situation I'm in. Every single piece of my equipment runs and works. And, there's certain jobs that you need 3 dump trucks going, and then, work slows down, and then we're doing fiber optics for Kit Carson Electric, and then those dump trucks are parked, and they stay parked, they all work, but you're not using them. So in the excavation business, there is a very big need for storage of equipment. And, it would be hard to run a business where you got a job and you had to sell everything when that job was done. And then if you got a new job, you had to go buy everything all over again. And that's kind of the situation of where it's at. A lot of the equipment that is being used for storage, it's not started on a daily basis. It's not used on a daily business basis. I don't own a gravel pit, so the thing where it comes handy for me is if we get a big road job somewhere, I have trucks and belly dumps and I could, check the air, get them going, get the road job done. The equipment stays on the job site till the job's done, and then when the job is finished, it comes back to the property and it's parked. So I do want to state in 2016, last time I was here, asking for a special use permit for the other property, we had a huge contract with Taos Valley. At the time I had 17 employees, and I was asking for the special use permit at the commercial, or at the 5,000 square foot building. I was denied for that. Since then, I have, this year the most I've had is 4 employees. So I do want to state at the last meeting, my father-in-law, Albert Struck, stated that I had 10 employees. I understand he was trying to help, and he's probably trying to let the commission know that I'm someone in the community that employs people, and employment I think is a big part here in Taos. It's hard to stay busy here in Taos. And as much as he was trying to help, I will swear in again, I'll write down whatever you need, I can tell you all my employees. Right now, I have 3 employees, one of them being my father. So right now, including myself, there's 4. So in 2012, did I meet the regulations of 2005? Or I'm sorry, not 2012, 2016 when I was applying for the other permit? No, I did not. Obviously, I had grown, and that's why I was trying to get into a bigger space. But after I was denied here, I've had no choice but to downsize. And it's a very sad thing. I still have a really bad taste in my mouth about the last time we were here because I was denied, but it is what it is. But now I've downsized because that's the only way I had to keep on operating, and here I am again, being, possibly at risk of having my entire company shut down. Now, I think that's most of the history on it. If you guys have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer anything that pertains to that at this time. If not, I'd like to move further into stating exactly what the complaints are at 123C State Road 240.
And Mr. Vigil, the next step would be for any other appealee, but there is not in this case, correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct, and as the appellee, the appellant, Mr. Vigil, could proceed with his presentation. So right here, I'd like to read a paragraph to you, and it's in the appeal. If the commission would like, I could go one by one. Mr. Edward Vigil had stated that there was 9 reasons that the storage or that the cottage industry was being denied, and I have, in all 9 of these, we could take the time and go through it. Hopefully everyone's had time to go through the packet.
Commissioners, it starts on page 48.
If you would like, I could state each one of those 9 reasons one by one. But I know this is a big meeting today for other reasons, but I'd like to read a statement here for you that was really, I think, the main core of this. And I had some help from a good friend with this statement, and just hit it right up the nail on the head. It says here, in 2008, Protégé excavation was granted approval for a cottage industry under the existing parameters at that time. The business is still in compliance under the original parameters that the approval was granted. If Protégé excavation is now being held to the new parameters of the updated land use regulations, then most of the businesses in Taos County would be considered non-conforming. I believe that if Taos County pursues the penalization of Protégé excavation, Taos County must then go after all of the non-conforming uses and non-permitted uses that have commenced after 1997. And there are quite a few in this county. Is Taos County going to penalize all the business, or is the Taos County Planning and Zoning Office only going to target those businesses with 1 or more neighbors raising a concern? This is not a consistent enforcement of the land use regulations. I feel that Protégé excavation is being discriminated against and fair play is not being followed. Now, that's a huge statement there because, you know, if you think of most, and I'm not going to name, you know, I've spoken with Mr. Vigil, and I don't think that this would be the right place to just start naming off all non-conforming businesses, but, you know, electrical companies, plumbing companies, landscaping companies. Right now, the way the land use regulation reads is, if you have more than 3 pieces of equipment, you are now commercial. You do not fall under the cottage industry. So my son goes off and he wants to follow his footsteps. He goes to college and he comes back. I try to help him out. I say, you know what, son, let me give you a small loan. Let me get you a skid loader, a backhoe, and a dump truck. He is now held to the same parameters that I am with more than 3 pieces of equipment. And if you guys remember correctly, in 2016 when we went, you know, there's a very big range. You're either a cottage industry who's maybe doing a little bit of farming in a small greenhouse, or you're full-blown commercial. And there's a lot of areas in the land use regulations that contradict itself. It also says that if you make any money off of what you're doing, you're now commercial. Well, are Airbnbs commercial? You know, I mean, it just leaves things so broad. And I think that something really needs to be done because there's a lot of small businesses in Taos that are going to be hurt like this. This is going to open the door. If you shut down my small business, it just opens the door for any neighbor anywhere in Taos County to say, no, we don't want that here. You're not grandfathered in. It doesn't matter. You need to follow the land use regulations of today. It doesn't matter when you started your business. And that, in a nutshell, is what's happening to me, and I don't think that that's the right direction for Taos County to go regarding small businesses. I'd also like to say that I do have letters, and I'm happy to give them to you. I don't want to waste any of your time, but I have letters from every adjoining neighbor, except the one that's complaining, that says that they have absolutely no problem with what we're doing there. Kristen Lucas, there's a letter in here from her. She asked us to just move the equipment to the back of the property. We complied with that and did that. She has no issue. At previous meetings, Ms. Montgomery was stating that, you know, her and Gail, and she was putting her and Gail, or her and Kristen in the same category, that they both agreed with the same things, and that's not true. So I want to state, I have letters from every single neighbor except Ms. Montgomery stating that they do not have a problem with what we're doing. I would also like to state that since the 2016 hearing where I was denied for the special use permit at the other property, that I've sold a lot of trailers, I've sold a bunch of stuff that I didn't need to clean up both properties. So I have, and it's free to Mr. Vigil, he's seen that as he's the one that gets the calls and gets the complaints. I've sold at least a third of the equipment that I had at that time that I do no longer have. So right now, I had to downsize, and I'm just trying to stay working. I also want to state that the things that Ms. Montgomery has complained about is things that about my horse, about my dogs, about my children. You know, if a vehicle comes in late at night, she's complaining about that. I mean, everything you can think of. She's called the branding inspector multiple times on us. We are big supporters of the Taos County Fair. I've bought goats before, had them in my nice horse trailer, had food, water. She called, complained we were, you know, I couldn't take them to get processed yet. So they were in there for a bit. They had hay. She complained about that. She complained my horses didn't have water. Branding inspector came again. There's a huge water trough on the other side of the fence. She's complained about my dog. She complained about my children who were playing baseball in the backyard and broke the window. Yes, they did. Did I pay for that window? Yes, I did pay for the window. I apologized. I said I was sorry. She was complaining about the kids. Can't they play in the front yard? Well, let my kids play in the front yard right next to Highway 240. I mean, that's a safe place for my kids to play, I think. She complains about diesel fumes, and this would be, I think, for the health and welfare, and I think that that's an important part, everybody's health and welfare. She starts her car up in the morning to get the frost off her windows, as most of us do, because you can't do much till the frost is off your window. She complains about, I think, all my personal vehicles, so all my personal vehicles are diesel. I'm sorry, I have diesel vehicles, they're all Dodges. I do it so, they're all the same parts. We've got to know what we got to do when we're working on them. So by you denying me today, if that's what you choose to do, this is not going to solve any of her complaints. The same exact complaints are going to be there. She asked me to move my camper to the back of the yard. I did that. She asked me to move my horse trailer to the back of the yard. I did that. She asked me to build a fence. I did that. Move the rest of the heavy equipment to the back of the yard. I did that. And no matter what I have done, she has been unhappy. And she keeps saying, if you do this, I'll be okay. If you do this, I'll be okay. Well, I've done it all, and I'm tired. There's just certain people in life that you can never make happy. But I do want to state that no matter what the decision is today, this is not going to solve any of her complaints. All it is going to do is hurt a small business in Taos.
Thank you, Mr. Vigil.
Thank you.
Commissioner Blake.
Thanks, Chairman. Mr. Vigil, so you got a cottage industry permit in 2008,
Yes, sir.
and why did you get that?
At the time when I went to Taos County, they knew that I worked at UPS. They knew that I had, they knew the business I was doing, and it was recommended to me at the time that was the permit that I applied for.
But your office was out of your house?
Yes, sir.
And how many pieces of equipment did you have parked on your property when you got the permit?
I would say 10 at least. I can go back to pictures, and you can see there's many, many pictures from different times that the Taos County got from Google Earth. And you can see the amount of equipment that I started off with, and you can see what the current property looks like, which is, I mean, it's, I would say if not half, there's less equipment there than what was there before.
And it was disclosed in your application process that you would be parking those pieces of equipment on your property?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, the map you're referring to, it's not dated. Where is the most current 2018 map to see what you're storing there currently? Is it the very last document, but it's not dated? Or if it is dated?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, the most current aerial that was provided to you was a 2017 aerial, and that should be the very last page.
Okay. So, Mr. Vigil, currently, how many pieces of business equipment do you need to have at the site?
So the main thing is there's a belly dump back there, which is a trailer for hauling gravel. There's a tandem, there's one tandem dump truck back there right now. There's a lowboy hooked up to a semi-trailer, and there's a wood chipper, and there's one service truck with a trailer, with a tilt deck trailer for hauling smaller equipment. And other than that, ma'am, that's all the commercial pieces that are on the property right now.
So how many pieces of commercial equipment do you own in total?
I have to, if I had to guess, I have seven semi-trucks, 4 tandems, 3 loaders, 2 backhoes, 2 skid loaders, 9 excavators, all different sizes. And all that equipment is never at that property. Since I was denied in 2016, I've been left at getting a place in Angel Fire, and I have that equipment over there now. But I operate both out of Angel Fire and out of Taos, so there is a need for me to have somewhere to store equipment here in Taos. I can't justify having to go pick equipment up in Angel Fire and bring it here every time I need it at this location.
Could you say that again? 7 semis, 4?
7 semis, so like 7 tractors, semi-tractors, 5 tandem dump trucks. Let's see, I have 2 service trucks for, taking fuel to the equipment, things like that. 2 backhoes, 2 skid loaders, 9 excavators, different sizes.
If I could, Commissioner O'Donnell, Mr. Vigil, what's in each car, what's here?
So there's some stuff at job sites right now. The only thing that's in the back, there's a semi with a lowboy trailer. There's one tandem dump truck. There's one belly dump. There's 2 service trucks. And then I have, I want to mention, so there's attachments, there's small buckets for the different size excavators. There's one excavator there right now, so, and I'm glad you asked that, because with the amount of equipment, you're probably saying, wow, well, yes, I understand, but that's not what's at the property. That's not what's at the property, and that's not how much equipment I need to keep at the property. And I'd also like to state that out of all these years, Ms. Montgomery complained twice this year. And both of those complaints were about having a piece of equipment that was stored outside of her window where she could see it. And the only reason that was kept there, both complaints, one was in July, I know for sure, we graded Nighthawk Trail. The next day we were grading Vista Linda subdivision. So we graded Nighthawk Trail, we got done with that road. We were getting a lot of moisture, and that's the best time to grade a road, when you can get proper compaction, when there's moisture in the ground. So it was parked at my house, and it didn't go all the way to the back of the property because it was an absolute muddy mess back there. And by parking it back there, I'd be tracking mud all the way back onto there and all the way on 240, so where I have gravel is where I park the machine. Next morning, roaded it over to Vista Linda subdivision, and that was one of the days she complained. The other day, I actually had a truck that the alternator went out right there where it was parked, where we were loading. And the truck was parked there for a day and a half until the new alternator came in, and the truck was fixed and hauled out. And so in a whole year, in 365 days, she complained twice, and my business has been shut down because of that. And I just find that, I don't even have words for that. And it's because it was muddy. Had it not been completely muddy and saturated in the back, I would have just parked it in the back.
Mr. Vigil,
Yes, ma'am.
how many pieces of equipment do you need to store there currently? What do you need to store there?
So if I could store one grader there, so that I could have a grader available here in town if needed, if I could store one backhoe there, possibly 2 mini excavators. We do the digging for Phoenix Mechanical, and so sometimes if there's a water leak, they say, hey, we've got an emergency, we need something right now. So I do need to have things close on hand to be able to operate my business successfully, is being the guys to go to when somebody has a problem. I would say a tandem, I could write a list. If I had to guess, I would say 10, 10 pieces of equipment between trucks and trailers, and the loaders and excavators.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield to the commissioner sitting next to me, and I still have other questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Edward, at any time today, are we going to do a site visit? I see it as much helpful for me in order to make a proper decision as to a site visit. And if you can, based on the maps that we have here before us, I'm not quite familiar as to where the property is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Commissioner Romero, the site visit will be determined by you all, and I'll yield to Mr. Chairman and you as Commissioners.
We could do that this morning.
And I'll yield to you again.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, what you're looking at here, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Romero, this is the 2017 aerial image of the property in question, Mr. Steve Vigil's property, which is 123C State Road 240 in the Cordillera area. You'll notice that it's a little hard to distinguish, but there should be a red boundary that depicts the location of the home. And it'll also show what would be a grader towards the rear of the property, or somewhere in that area. And it'll show where Mr. Vigil has relocated a majority of his equipment, or a portion of his equipment to the rear property. Unfortunately, I don't have a laser pointer with me, and I don't think it will work on the monitor right now, but I believe that Anissa should be able to identify with the cursor as to where the property is located.
Okay, so my question then, thank you, Edward, is to Mr. Vigil. You're in a relatively, it's a farming community as well.
Yes, sir.
And so what has been the past history in terms of other people in that area? There's a lot of contractors.
Yes, sir. So the neighbor to my northeast is Dennis Al-Assad. He has tractors, balers, backhoes, things of that nature for farming. Louis Tafoya's, it would be down Hammer Lane directly across the street. Louis Tafoya, you guys know him, did excavation exactly as I do and has the exact same equipment that I have still located at his property. Blossom's Garden Center is 100 yards. It would be southeast from me. And there's semi trucks going in and out. They're hauling topsoil in, they're hauling topsoil out. They have skid loaders, trees. Then also, so to the direct, I guess southeast to me, that would be, that's our neighbor, Dan Leeds. He's the Under Armour guy. If you know him, he bought the house from the guy that used to run Molly Corps. So he bought the house after we were already there. Then Gail Montgomery is directly north of me, and her house is 2 stories. You know, kind of, you know, her house looks directly into the, you know, into our backyard. So I'm sure that's, you know, why.
So, Mr. Hill, Edward, you're pretty familiar with the area. How would you describe it?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Romero, what we have before I address your question, we have the aerial imagery again depicting Mr. Vigil's property. It is the structure that's located right in the center of the screen. This is does not identify the equipment that's located near the back of the property, but that is the subject property. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Romero, I would describe this property as a rural residential area.
This property was previously owned by Roy and Chris Portis.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, if I may, based on the aerial here, you'll see the 2-story structure near the bottom middle of the screen. That is Ms. Montgomery's home in relation to Mr. Vigil's home, which is right in the middle of the screen.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Vigil,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm looking at the second to the last map in Mr. Vigil's packet, and the blue house in the far back where he's supposed to store heavy equipment. Who is the property owner?
I believe that'd be Dennis Salazar, if I'm looking at the right one. Now, I would
The
like...
entrance to Mr. Salazar's is off from Medio, not too far.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. And I would like to state, if you look at the house, so my house is right there in the middle. If you look, there's about probably 8 trailers in the front and all kinds of stuff. There's absolutely nothing up there. The only thing there now, my daughter parks her 4Runner, and that's it. So, you know, I would love for you guys to do a site visit to see the difference in the pictures that you see up here compared to how it is. And because this is an older picture, obviously I can't remember the last time I had that much stuff in the front. But if you can look to the side of 2017, and to the side you can see the 2-story Miss Montgomery's. The only thing there is a camper trailer right there. I moved everything out from the whole front area and moved it elsewhere so that she wouldn't have to look at it. So I moved stuff to the front, the back, and I took everything out of the front. There's only a few things in the back now. So I just want to state that, you know, I've done everything I can to do the neighborhood. Like I said, there's some people that you'll never make happy.
So, Mr. Chairman, my question would be, can't we do a site visit today? I really would like to do that in order to learn more of the surroundings of the property and exactly what it is that's out there.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we do a site visit.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. I'll second.
With discussion, my only issue with site visit, that means we're becoming investigators, and that's not our role.
Mr. Chairman, could I suggest that we hear from everybody first? I mean, we'll all know better if we're close to a decision at that point. have the option of going into executive session, and we have the option of site visit.
So, based on discussion, that is an option that we have in executive sessions.
Can we hear everybody out first?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that in the past, that maybe not this commission, but other commissions, we have done site visits, and for me, it clearly allows me to see exactly what the surroundings are of this particular area. Sometimes things can be a hearsay, and or we can hear a lot of stuff from the public that may not necessarily be the truth, or might be exaggerated. And so I just want to make sure that we give everyone in the neighborhood that opportunity to see this.
And we do have that opportunity once we go into executive session.
And if you don't want to do it, I believe the staff could.
Actually, that's not what I said. I said we already have that option.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we need to move. Mr. Audio.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, it's correct that you have that option. It can be done, and it can be done legally. The issue is, however, it is, because this is a judicial proceeding, the evidence comes in through the parties presenting evidence to you. We, as me as your attorney and you as the commission, have to make the decision based upon the evidence brought before you. You can, if there is a need for further evidence, you can ask for that. And if you do a site visit, the primary issue is to not become a witness in the proceeding by introducing new evidence that wasn't brought in through the parties. If you use it as to orient yourself and to see what it actually looks like on the ground, like I said, it is legal, but it is up to the discretion of the commission. You could decide it now, you could table it until all the evidence is heard, and then make a decision at that point.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I postpone my motion.
I'll do the same with my second announcement.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for planning. Why didn't we have a current map? And is that allowed right now to give us a current map? We've got a year-and-a-half Google map.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, that imagery doesn't exist just yet. We don't have new imagery in 2018. That's why that's not available to you.
I'm a little confused.
Google Maps don't update all the time.
Oh, you're saying that's...
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, that's correct. I will do my best before this meeting is over or concluded to see if I can get an updated 2018 Google map.
And I'm sorry, but Mr. Chairman, what about the assessor's office and the pictometry that they did? Can you access that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, the pictometry imagery is also 2017. It's not 2018.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vigil is indicating that since these photographs were last taken, the area has changed somewhat. There's less equipment, did you say?
Yes, sir. Like, a third, maybe even that.
Okay, so where are you taking it then? Is there another area in the Taos Valley that you're...
So it's an Angel Fire. That's, I can't take it to communal providers.
If I can help, I think I heard in your testimony that you rotate as needed, sort of PR.
Yes, sir. Yes, so you know, if we're doing a big job here in Taos, that's the thing, most of the equipment stays on the job site, you know, throughout the job. And now some of it will go back to the house so that I have it on hand if an emergency comes up and we have work, but if not, most of it goes to Angel Fire to not have issues with anywhere here in Taos County.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vigil of the Planning Department, you referenced the 2005 LUR. And you had indicated in the packet you gave us reference to Article 1, Section 1, which I can't find in the packet.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, could you be more specific when we talk about Article 1, Section 1, so for orientation, are you making reference
To the cottage industry, what the regs were back there, and there's part of that document is missing. So I'd like that document to be referenced.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, if I could refer you to Protégé Excavation Book 1. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, if you would give me just a minute, I will locate that document for you. This particular document was part of the original record of the Planning Commission.
It's on page 114.
Should begin on page 112 with the cover to Ordinance 2005-10. I read for you into the record earlier the definition of cottage industry. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I also would like to clarify for you, and while I was waiting for this clarification until it was my turn to do my presentation, you need to make sure that you understand that Mr. Vigil is not being held to Ordinance 2015-2, which is the land use regulations that I basically applied to Mr. Vigil when I issued a letter of revocation. And Mr. Vigil is not being held to Ordinance 2016-2 either, nor is he being held to Ordinance 2018-2, the Taos County Land Use Regulations. I merely made reference to Ordinance 2018-2 for the purposes of establishing that Section 3.4.2, suspension, revocation, or permits, is the exact same language that was found in 2015 or -2 in 2016. Again, and I've made reference to the other sections of land use code, the present land use code, for the definition of home occupation and the home occupation's performance standards, for reference to only indicate that that is what would be presently held if somebody came in and established a home occupation under today's regulations. Back at the time, a home occupation, or at the time this was viewed as a cottage industry. We have since changed the definition to now reflect that this is considered a home occupation, but he is not being held to those standards. He's being held to the standards of 2005.
Mr. Chairman, I understand that, and I do see the definition here of the 2005. Employees no more than 5 persons, not members of the immediate family. That would indicate he could have 10. I mean, I understand this is vague language, but it does say he can have 5, and it's not members of the immediate family. So then, how many immediate family members could he have in addition to the 5?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, that would be up to interpretation. Obviously, it's not clear as to how many family members he could employ, but conceivably he could employ, based on this definition, 5 individuals who are not considered family members.
All right, and then so again, I'm missing Article 1, Section 1 of 2005-10, and I'd like to look at, you referred to it, it's not here, and I'd just like to see what the language stated back in 2005.
And so, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, and I apologize if Article 1 and Section 1 are not included in the packet.
On page 113.
I believe it's
No, it's not, it's because you
That
turned,
ordinance 2005-10 is on page 112, that's the cover.
yeah,
If you
but
go to 113, cottage industry is the bottom and top of 113 to 114.
I understand, but I don't see Article 1, Section 1.
Can we read that article, please?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I offer it to the record, Ordinance 2005-10. Article 1, Section 1 is authority and intent. And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Commissioner O'Donnell, could you please refer me to the section of my staff report that reference is made to Article 1, Section 1, because that may be an incorrect reference. I should have been making reference to Article 1, Section 2, which is the immediate page following the definition of cottage industry on the book that was presented to you. And I'll read what Article 1, Section 2 states, which is page 114 of the book. It basically states, Article 1, Section 2, or Article 2, Section 2, I apologize, allowed uses do not require county review or approval. Number 1 is a single-family residence on slopes of 20% grade are allowed. Number 2 is an agricultural use. And then number 3 is a cottage industry, which refers us back to the definition of a cottage industry. Back in 2005, when Mr. Vigil's cottage industry was approved by the planning department, this is the criteria that was used in approving Mr. Vigil's cottage industry.
So let me be clear, this ordinance did not dictate how many vehicles.
It did not.
Okay. It did not dictate how many pieces of equipment can be on the site.
It did not.
Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioners, so we can proceed with Mr. Vigil's presentation? Mr. Vigil, do you have anything else?
Other than just stating that the denial of me to store heavy equipment on my property is gonna deny me to be able to work in Taos County. And I just hope you guys understand that. I stayed in 2016, go for the special use permit on the building, and that was just to do maintenance on it. I was denied there. Now, I'm threatened on getting denied for working out of my home, which is the way I started. Right now, I'm meeting all the conditions of the 2005 regulations with which Commissioner O'Donnell just stated. It doesn't state how many pieces of equipment you can have. I do want to go back and tell you that all this equipment works. This isn't junk. It's not a junkyard. I'm not restoring old cars. It's all equipment that does work, but it's not used on a daily basis.
Commissioner Gallegos, are you?
Yes.
Go ahead.
If everybody can hear me, thank you. I apologize for not being able to attend the meeting. But just for house cleaning, there was a motion and a second to a site visit. Has that been decided?
That was tabled.
That was taken care of?
Actually, I apologize. It was postponed to not determined.
Okay. The other thing I do have, Mr. Vigil from Protégé, you have some equipment out there that's not mechanized as far as engines. You have a lot of trailers that I see out there. On the diagrams, you probably have a few semis that actually do create these things. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so parking 15 trailers of equipment trailers is the same as putting 4 cattle trailers or bike trailers or whatever you want to call it. So those shouldn't be deemed as pieces of equipment that operate. They are just pieces of equipment that actually do traveling of the equipment that's shouldn't be used.
Yes, sir. I have flatbed trailers that I use for getting hay for my horses. I have 2 horse trailers. I have one that has living quarters if we go on a long trip, and then I have one that's a short horse trailer if we need to go up in the mountains. At the time this picture was taken, I had 1 toy hauler and 1 camper. I've sold that toy hauler, so I do have 1 camper. So yes, sir, to answer your question, a lot of the things out there that may be looked at as commercial use are actually private or agricultural use trailers.
So you have other pieces there, we get other pieces that are attachments per se to backhoes or to excavators that are just pieces that are not actual equipment.
Yes, sir. I have, for instance, forks for a skid loader, brush hogs. I have a brush hog that goes on the front of a skid loader, buckets for the different excavators, things of that nature. So yes, sir, there are attachments out there that do not have an engine. They're just implements for the different pieces of equipment.
Well, I do want to say that you're a victim of your own success, that's for sure, that yes.
Yes, sir.
And I think that we as a commission as a whole really need to take a look at what the effect of this decision is going to make on the whole county. There's people that do business in my district that it'll affect them down the road, or possibly the next 60 days or 6 months. So let me review the planning and zoning director's report, I guess, to your holders. And Mr. Chair, I don't know where we'll be next, but I do feel comfortable with hearing what I heard so far today.
Mr. Chairman, if Commissioner Gallegos could repeat what you just said. I didn't
Mark, we kind of lost your last.
Okay, I just said I felt comfortable with listening in on everything that's been said, and I don't know whether it's showing next, but I just feel comfortable with all the comments that I've heard from both commissioners and from Mr. Vigil.
Okay, well, Mr. Vigil's planning director will be presenting his side now. No? I mean, the public will be speaking at this time, Mark.
Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Vigil, before we go to public?
Yes, sir. In today's new land use regulations, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Edward Vigil, if you have more than 2 employees or if you have more than 3 pieces of equipment, you're commercial. And I don't think that adequately reflects the small businesses in Taos County, because that's gonna provide that everybody needs to go before get a special use permit and do all the things that the special use permit requires to run a small business. And I think that there's a big void there that should be for somebody that's not full-blown commercial, but kind of stuck right in the middle. And I see that hindering small businesses and new businesses coming into Taos moving forward, because it's not just in Codieta, as you saw, it's in off Camino Caballo. If I went to Arroyo Seco, or if I went anywhere you go in Taos County, there's always going to be somebody that says, I don't want that here. And that seriously makes it even harder than it already is in this economy to run successfully as a small business.
Mr. Chairman, before
Commissioner O'Donnell.
close this, you had said on page 6 that weather impacts the back of the lot. Have you put any gravel down or anything to keep it from getting muddy? And you do have a snow plow and you can plow properly.
Yes, ma'am, I do have a snow plow. If the ground's not frozen yet, like now in the winter time, if I have to move anything from back there, I have to do it early in the morning when the ground's cold, because if the ground thaws out, it gets really muddy and nasty where I can't get anything out of it. In the very back of the property, I have a 90-foot ground pin, so that's kind of between me and Mr. Salazar. That's what's in the very back of the property. The equipment, the semi-trucks are parked right in front of that ground pen. And as far as putting gravel, I have got some millings to be able to get the equipment from back there. But I do want to state, Commissioner O'Donnell, I have the equipment in the very back of the property. It just as it was asked of me, not required, it was asked of me by Mr. Edward Vigil and Mrs. Montgomery. I did that, but as soon as that equipment drives past her house, no matter what I do, she's not going to be happy. She's not going to be happy until there's nothing back there. If I go in the morning and start my pickup to warm up, I'm sorry, but there's diesel fumes, just like she starts her vehicle and there's exhaust fumes from her car, and those are the things she's complaining about. She complained
Mr.
twice.
Chairman, I have to ask, I'm still asking you a question, and that is, can you put gravel in the back? Because you indicated you couldn't park your heavy equipment in the back in the winter because weather impacts the back of the lot. So my question is, could you, and I guess I didn't see anything in your comments that you would do that, so I'm just asking you now.
Yes, ma'am, I have no problem doing that. I would be happy to put gravel back there, but I'm playing with the double-edged sword. They want me to keep it agricultural because alfalfa still grows. If you look at the pictures, there's grasses and things growing around the equipment, and that's how often it gets used. But when I need it, but I'd be happy to put gravel, and I have, when the complaints were made was when we were getting the monsoon, so it wasn't the ground being frozen or thawed, it was just the continuous rains that were back there. And since then, I have put some asphalt millings that would be on the northeast side of the property. I have a strip there, and the equipment that I use more, I park there so that I will not have as many issues getting in and out of the property if the weather is not favorable.
Right, but you're not baling hay back there, correct?
No, ma'am, I'm not.
Okay.
The horses will go back there and graze, but not baling hay and things like that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Can I have the sign-up sheet for this public hearing? Yeah, I was just getting my timer off. Okay. At this time, we will open the public hearing. I will remind you, as you come forward, state your name and you will be sworn by the clerk. The first participant is the original complainant, and she'll be given a reasonable time. The others listed on this, as in public comments in regular meetings, your comments be limited to 5 minutes or less. So I call now Ms. Gail Montgomery. Yes, Sheriff.
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be wise, we're an hour and 15 minutes into this meeting, just to remind those people that came in late what will and will not be tolerated.
Okay, as stated, I will read I'll read I, J, and K. And chairperson shall have the right to prevent repetitive statements by asking the speaker who is being repetitious to end his or her remarks, and if appropriate, leave the podium or floor. Chairperson shall have the right to take any and all appropriate actions to ensure appeal hearings are orderly and equitably conducted, so that persons having the right to speak shall have the opportunity to do so. Only the speaker having the floor shall be allowed to speak. Members of the public attending the hearing shall not speak, comment, or disrupt when another has been given the floor by the chairperson. And K, the chairperson shall enforce the rules at his option, by the Sergeant at Arms, which is Sheriff Jerry Holgriff, or his designee if he has to leave to assist in enforcing these rules. So, good morning, Ms. Montgomery, how are you?
Thank you.
The clerk is right over here.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm under oath and penalty of lawful perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual?
Yes, ma'am.
Please state your name for the record.
Bill Montgomery. Okay, before I'm going to read my notes because in the planning committee I got nervous and did repeat myself. In reference to some of the complaints other than the property, I have never complained about his personal vehicles. I started putting up my fence before he did. His dogs have broken my bird bath, drug off potted plants, dug up plants, His children, I had to go over and talk to his wife about 3 times for throwing rocks at my house. And he did have to replace Kristen's window, which was only like $180, but my windows were worth about $1,000 a piece because I had them done when I bought the house. Okay. Anyway, right now, he has downsized and it's been pretty nice and quiet, okay? Because most of the equipment is gone and there aren't trucks going in and out all day. But as a full-scale operation, it was a constant and persistent problem. In the warm months, I had no choice but to keep my windows shut to avoid the smell of diesel fumes, which have actually farty, toxic compounds, the noise created by their vehicles and dust created. Large vehicles are going in and out all day long when he was running full scale. Also, Edward Vigil had told Protégé that their hours of operation were to be between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Well, that has not happened. There were some mornings that they were there before 6:30 a.m. doing whatever they do to get ready to go to work, and definitely after 5, because I could not have people over for dinner on my patio because trucks kept coming in. On September 12th, it was determined that it was no longer a cottage industry, but the next day, he moved a red semi-cab up right next to my house. You got to realize the only thing between his property and mine is an easement road and our fences. Nothing more. Anyway, he moved this red cab up near my house, and I wondered why they had done this because it had never been there before. Well, I found out the next night because at 1:15 a.m. in the morning, they started revving up that truck. I actually thought a plane had crashed. It woke me up. And it was so loud that I called Edward Vigil's phone at the county. I knew he wasn't there, but he'd hear it on Monday, and let him hear how loud it was from my bedroom on the other side of the house, not on his side of the house. Anyway, excuse me, I was going to say something repetitively. I would never purchase my home if I thought that type of business would have been allowed next door. These are very narrow pieces of land. I also doubt if there's anyone in this room that would want that type of business next to their home. I mean, it's right next to my home. And if those trucks are running in all day, I actually had a painting fall off my wall from the vibrations. If I should ever try to sell my home, this would definitely be a deficit in finding a buyer. In closing, I thank you, and I'm asking you as the commissioners to be in agreement with those of the planning committee on September 12th. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Is this the vehicle you referenced that was idling? Can you describe, could you come and take a look at this?
Are you talking?
Yes, I am. You referenced something late at night. Is that the vehicle?
No.
Okay.
It's a red semi-cab. It's still there, right next to the house.
All right, could I have that back? So it's, where's that reference to the picture? There are pictures of that red. And that's there, you said, because there was a fence or a trash problem? Is the trash bin still there?
Yes, it is, but he has been keeping it covered. The birds were getting into it and throwing things over my property, you know.
I'm just looking for that picture that shows the vehicle.
And this is an industrial dumpster.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, that photograph that Ms. Montgomery is alluding to is not included in your packet. If you recall her testimony, Ms. Montgomery indicated that after the meeting of September 12th, Mr. Vigil brought a red vehicle next to her property, and through Mrs. Montgomery's testimony indicated that he started the vehicle at approximately 1:15 in the morning. That photograph is not part of those photographs submitted to you as part of the record.
Thank you. Next, I call Barbara Oling.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm under oath and penalty of lawful perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual?
Yes.
Please state your name for the record.
Pardon?
Please state your name for the record.
Okay, my name is Barbara O'Lane, and Gail and I have been friends for 15 years. And while Mr. Vigil was operating his company, the trucks were going in and out right by her house, creating dust and fumes. And I, as a witness, I'm not a doctor, but her health deteriorated. In the last 3 months, since he cut back, her health has improved. And the health of the neighbors, I believe, is one of the criteria of a cottage industry. So I believe you need to take that into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maez. The clerk is to your right.
Raise your right hand, sir. Do you swear and affirm under oath and penalty of lawful perjury that the testimony you're about to give is true and factual?
Yes, I do.
Please state your name.
My name is David Maez. I'm a resident of Ranchos, and I'm speaking solely as a private citizen and not representing either of the parties. And I want to be clear, the purpose of my remarks are to address needed reform in the land use regulations. And so I realize this is a very sensitive and emotional issue. And I want again to stress that I'm not siding with either party, but it's easier for me not to speak, but being involved in land use regulations for the last 10 years, I felt compelled to come forward and address some larger issues in the community, a couple of which have been very obvious, or should be very obvious to you, and that is the need for regulating this type of industry. I've written out some remarks. I'd rather read them, and I've timed them in the right at 5 minutes, so I won't take much more than that. I speak to the effect of this decision on what are popularly called contratistas, contractors. The label covers a broad range of specialties: plumbers, electricians, plasterers, anyone who works as a handyman. Our current land use regulations do not serve them well. I will suggest an LUR remedy, and I will also suggest a solution to this particular appeal. Especially during election season to government offices here in Taos, we hear about the importance of preserving Taos traditions and values. Save our acequias and save our agrarian lifestyle. Save our Hispanic culture, fiestas, etc. Save our Native American culture. San Jerónimo Modé, all the Taos Pueblo, riches of Taos Pueblo culture. And there are other cultures that live in Taos, I should mention. We usually just talk about Hispanics and Native Americans, but there's so many peoples commonly called Anglos and hippies that have lived here for years, decades, and even generations and should be considered part of this group. The critical, essential common denominator for accomplishing these goals is people, especially Taos youth. How to keep them here in our community and how to keep them from leaving their homeland to find work elsewhere. There are few choices for our high school graduates looking for a secure job here in Taos. The two largest employers are the schools and government agencies, and there are others, of course, like the Ski Valley and Kit Carson Electric. But I contend to you that among the young people that try to remain here in Taos and do not work for these large employers, contractors, contratistas, these folks are the largest construction sector. They are the largest group of people employed here in Taos. I know many who fall into this category, as I'm sure you do. And these workers do not fall cleanly into one specialty group. For example, I have a neighbor who's an electrician, and he has several pieces of heavy-duty equipment parked on his property because he needs to do earth moving work to remain here in Taos, and he's successful at both. But there's so many of these people here in Taos. Your ruling on this appeal will set a precedent and affect a large group of local people, among them many young people, like Steve and his family, who are trying to earn a living in a very challenging employment environment. I suggest that we should be creating regulations that encourage and assist our young people to remain here in Taos, and at the very least, we should not make that task more difficult. I don't believe that the LUR and the associated matrix adequately recognize this group of workers. There's no contractor definition. There's 20-some pages of definitions. There's no contractor definition. There's no definition for heavy equipment operator. And if you go to that infamous matrix, there's only one reference to storing heavy equipment. There's all kinds of definitions getting into very specific details for dance studios or all sorts of businesses, but it doesn't address this one specific group. A remedy would be to establish a second regulation. I hate saying this, but here we go with more regulations. Perhaps similar to the one for mobile home park operators with associated performance standards. The standards would include requirements like a limited number of machines that can be stored on a parcel of land. The size of the parcel of land would correlate to the number of machines. It would establish the distance from neighboring homes that the heavy equipment could be parked, etc. Could get into all sorts of details. And I don't believe like anything like that exists now. Like it or not, we need businesses like Mr. Vigil's in the construction of a home. A backhoe is needed to move a large pile of dirt. A large dump truck is needed. As concerns this particular case, I suggest that a decision on this and other similar cases could be put on hold until such a regulation can be developed and approved. At that time, this case can be just judged against that standard. Should this commission or either party like a more expeditious outcome, the commissioners could order the parties into mediation to see if a professional mediator can arrive at a mutually agreeable decision. Should that fail, the two parties, if they agree, could enter a binding arbitration agreement. That means that an arbitrator that they would both agree would hear their arguments and make a decision, and they would both agree to abide by that decision. Both parties agree in advance to accept the arbitrator decision. I would recommend that either the mediation or arbitrator agreement be terminated at the time the new regulation is adopted. The county regulation will then take effect, and Mr. Vigil's business would have to conform to that regulation. Thank you for your consideration of these recommendations. Any
Thank you,
questions?
Mr. Okay, those are the ones that have signed up to speak during this portion of the hearing. At this time, we will close the public comment portion and move on to item D, and the planning department will now make its presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. If I may, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would like to refer you to Book 2 again. I would like to refer you specifically to the tab that has the Planning Director's staff report, page 3, if I may. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I refer you to the near the bottom of the page. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, in accordance with Section 3.4.2, revocation, suspension, extension, transferability, letter A, notice of non-compliance of Ordinance 2015-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations, which states, this is basically what I based my decision on in having revoking the ability of Mr. Vigil to store his equipment on the property. In any case where the conditions of a permit have not been or are not being complied with, or the terms of any law or ordinance are violated in connection therewith, the planning director shall give written notice to the applicant of the county's intention to suspend or revoke the permit. And within 30 calendar days following the mailing of such notice, the planning commission shall conduct a hearing thereon at which the planning commission shall either reinstate the permit with or without additional conditions or revoke the permit. And since this is a de novo hearing, section 3.4.2 permit revocation, suspension, extension, transferability and duration, letter A, notice of non-compliance of ordinance 2018-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations, which states the same as ordinance 2015-2. So therefore, Mr. Chairman, as de novo information or use of minimal information, I'd like to make reference to the fact that the revocation is also based on ordinance 2018-2. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, in a letter dated August 22nd, 2018, as Exhibit B found in your paperwork, which is actually the record submitted by Mr. Vigil, the Taos County Planning Director gave written notice of the revocation of the storing of equipment at 123C State Road 240. The location of the residence of Mr. and Mrs. Stephen R. Vigil, where Protégé excavation is operated from. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I want to clarify to you and make sure that you understand that section 3.4.2A advises where the conditions of a permit, in this case a cottage industry, have not been or are not being complied with, or the terms of any law or ordinance are violated in connection therewith. The planning director gave notice to the applicant of the county's intention to suspend or revoke the permit, cottage industry approval. As the planning director, I only revoked the ability of Mr. Vigil to store equipment on the site. I did not revoke the cottage industry approval and or business registration, which allow Mr. Vigil to continue to do business in Taos County. The emphasis of this entire hearing is the storing of heavy equipment at 123C State Highway 240, and how the storing of heavy equipment, I believe, and the Planning Commission believe, has altered the residential character of the area. I'm not going to read the letter of August 22nd, 2018 into the record. I just refer to it as the letter of revocation. First, I would like to advise you that a business registration for a cottage industry was issued to Mr. Stephen Vigil, doing business as Protégé Excavation, on or about March 26th of 2018, as evidenced in the county clerk's printout as part of your packet. The cottage industry approval was based on the type of business that Mr. Vigil would be operating from his home, which was excavation, located at 123C State Road 240 at that time. At that time, met the definition parameters of a cottage industry within the Land Use Regulations, Ordinance 2005-10, which were in effect at the time. We've given you the definition of a cottage industry. I'll skip this portion unless you desire for me to read that definition, and we'll skip this portion. I'll also skip the portion that indicates or makes reference to read the August 22nd letter into the record. And I'd like to come over to the bottom paragraph of page 4. While we don't know exactly the amount of equipment that Mr. Vigil had in 2008, it is very apparent that Mr. Vigil's business has grown to the point of where it is my belief, and the belief of the Planning Commission, and the belief of others, that Mr. Vigil has outgrown the definition of cottage industry, whereby the functioning of his business has altered the residential character of the neighborhood more along the lines of a full-scale commercial operation. I have advised Mr. Vigil on several occasions that he is the victim of his own success. By this I mean that as a result of his business being successful, through the years Mr. Vigil has grown and has increased the amount of equipment associated with his business. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, at this time, I would like to refer you to your monitors, and I would like to refer you to the first aerial image that is part of your packages. And in this particular first aerial image, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this particular first image, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, is identified by a date at the very top left as shown as August of 2009. And so, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, in this particular aerial imagery, I want to demonstrate to you that it appears that there is no equipment associated with Protégé excavation at the property in August of 2009. I stated to you in my staff report, as Mr. Vigil stated to you in his presentation, that the approval for business registration was in 2008. Next, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'll offer to you an aerial image of September of 2010. At this time, there are a few pieces of equipment located near the front, and there are a few pieces of equipment located near the back. And this aerial imagery was located, again, September of 2010. The next aerial image that I want to include into the record would be an aerial image dated August of 2011. This particular one also, and I apologize for the quality of the image, but it shows a few pieces of equipment similar to the image of 2010, where a good portion of the equipment from the front of the property has been removed.
Mr. Vigil, where's the other instrument? When did you buy this from Roy and Rick? I'm just trying to date these photos to when you moved in.
So I think we actually closed on the house in 2008 was when we actually closed, but we were living there a year prior under a real estate contract until I could get all the banking stuff and the appraisal, and so we had an agreement before, so we rented the house for a year before it was actually purchased in 2008.
Okay, I just needed that.
And
what was there before to what the photos are showing now?
And I did have a question. So are these photos that you had in 2008 actually from 2008? Are they from 2006? Because it seems like Google Maps is a couple of years behind. So I just want to clarify that, because in 2008 when I had equipment there, I don't have a choice to find Google Maps, but I can show proof of purchase of equipment and that I had no other properties at the time where the equipment would possibly have been stored. But I do want to state from the very beginning, I had at least 10 pieces of equipment on the property when I started in 2008.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Vigil, it's just that first photo looked, as I recall when I used to visit the forest. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the next aerial image that I have for you is of August of 2013. And in August of 2013, you'll notice that there's a little bit more equipment towards the rear of the property.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blake.
Yeah, just real quick, just to clarify what Steve said. Do we know, the dates that you're assigning to these, or are we not comfortable that those are the actual dates, or are we relying on Google Map where we're not sure?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blackenborn, to address your question, to address the question presented by Mr. Vigil, we're relying on Google Map. So I don't have anything else other than these maps that were created by our GIS specialists in the planning department that refer to these specific dates.
Okay.
Next, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we have an aerial image for you dated of October of 2016. And this will show again equipment directly behind Mr. Vigil's property, and will also show equipment at the rear of the property. Next, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, we have an aerial image dated November of 2016. And this one is probably one of the more clear pictures. And again, for reference, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, you'll notice that Mr. Vigil's property is a long rectangle, if you will, or a long piece of property that is approximately 3 acres in size. You'll notice that there are some trailers parked near the front of the property. In this image of 2016, you'll notice that there are a couple of recreational vehicles which are not part of this public in the middle of the property, next to Mrs. Montgomery's home, which is a 2-story structure. And then you'll reference what appears to be the double-wide manufactured home directly below Ms. Montgomery's home, and this is the home of the individual that Mr. Vigil made reference to as Kristen. And then, Mr. Chairman, you also made reference to the staggered equipment parked near the rear of the property. The next aerial image that we have is also of 2016, and this will show again a different angle of the property in relation to the equipment. And the last aerial image that we have for you is of 2017. And Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, this aerial image of 2017 is as a result that the equipment has been relocated to the rear of the property. This is based on communication that I have had based on complaints from Ms. Montgomery, where I had addressed Mr. Vigil to look at relocating some of the equipment, and Mr. Vigil did relocate the equipment away from Ms. Montgomery's home towards the rear of the property. I just want to add that to the record. And at this point, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'll refer you back to my staff report in Book 2. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, specifically, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the livelihood of Ms. Gail Montgomery and Ms. Kristen Lucas, although Mr. Vigil has indicated that Ms. Lucas does not have an issue anymore. Adjacent property owners have conveyed complaints and expressed concerns to the planning department over the storing and operating of the heavy equipment at this location for several years. Further, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, planning staff has never taken the position that Mr. Vigil's Protégé excavation is a legal non-conforming use grandfathered. In order to be considered a legal non-conforming use, Mr. Vigil's business would have had to commence being operational prior to the land use regulations being passed adopted, and the land use regulations date back to 1995. What has occurred with Mr. Vigil is that his cottage industry approval was granted on or about 2008, where Ordinance 2005-10 Taos County Land Use Regulations were in effect and at the time, and where we had provided you with the definition of a cottage industry. Had Mr. Vigil's business commenced after the new land use regulations were adopted in 2014 and amended in 2015 and 2016, and now in 2018, Mr. Vigil would have had to comply with the definition of a home occupation and the home occupation standards found in section 4.4.2, letters A through P of Ordinance 2015-2, and now 4.8.2 home occupation standards of Ordinance 2018-2. The home occupation standards referenced in section 4.8.2 of Ordinance 2018-2, Taos County Land Use Regulations, which are more stringent, are not being applied to Mr. Vigil. What is being applied to Mr. Vigil from Ordinance 2018-2 Taos County Land Use Regulations is section 3.4.2, letter A, Notice of Non-Compliance. Included in your packets again is the aerial imagery with different dates that identifies the location of the home of Mr. Vigil and his property and the location of the homes of Ms. Montgomery and Ms. Lucas. In addition, the aerial imagery demonstrates the accumulated equipment over the past 9 years. In my capacity as interim planning director and planning director, I have been addressing complaints from Ms. Gail Montgomery for over 3 years, including performance site inspections. While some of the complaints were frivolous, the majority of the complaints have been over the increased staging of heavy equipment and parking and operation mobilization of the heavy equipment at all hours of the day and the night. The complaints included are not limited to the idling of equipment for long periods of time, the associated noise and diesel smell of his idling equipment, the parking of heavy equipment close to the home of Ms. Montgomery and Ms. Kristen Lucas. I certainly want to acknowledge that Mr. Vigil has addressed the complaints concerns every time that I have reached out to Mr. Vigil. As a matter of fact, many times I have told Mr. Vigil, you don't hear from me unless I have a complaint from Ms. Montgomery, which is true. I also want to acknowledge that Mr. Vigil, as a result of complaints from Ms. Montgomery and Ms. Lucas, has removed equipment from the property and has relocated some of the equipment to the rear of the property away from the homes of Ms. Montgomery and Ms. Lucas. Mr. Vigil's efforts have reduced the number of complaints from Ms. Montgomery and Ms. Lucas to the tune of 2 to 3 complaints for calendar year 2018. Nonetheless, the complaints from Ms. Montgomery and Ms. Lucas have continued, with the most recent complaint coming on or about July 26, 2018. In my determination that Mr. Vigil, through his actions, has altered the residential character and has impacted the general welfare of both Ms. Montgomery and Ms. Lucas in violation of the definition of a cottage industry. Consideration could and also should be given to the safety impact associated with the transportation of trailer heavy equipment and or the ingress or egress of heavy equipment in general in and out of Mr. Vigil's property, given that New Mexico State Road 240 is a narrow two-lane roadway. The role of the Board of County Commissioners today is to determine whether or not to reinstate the ability to park equipment associated with Protégé excavation at 123C State Highway 240 with or without additional conditions, or to revoke the ability to park equipment at the reference site. It is my recommendation that you uphold the decision of the Planning Commission to revoke Mr. Vigil's ability to store equipment associated with Protégé excavation at his residential property at 123C State Road 240 for the following reasons, which shall also serve as findings of fact. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, number 1, Mr. Vigil, through his actions, has altered the residential character of the neighborhood through the increased staging, parking of heavy equipment. Number 2, Mr. Vigil, through his actions, has altered the residential character of the neighborhood through the operation and mobilization of heavy equipment at all hours of the day and night. Number 3, Mr. Vigil, through his actions, has altered the residential character of the neighborhood by idling the equipment for long periods of time. Number 4, Mr. Vigil, through his actions, has altered the residential character of the neighborhood through the noise and associated smells of diesel during extended periods of equipment idling. Number 5, Mr. Vigil, through his actions, has altered the general welfare concern in regard to his adjacent property owners through his actions as identified in 1 through 4 above, has created a general welfare concern. Number 6, Mr. Vigil, through his actions, is operating a full-time commercial operation rather than a cottage industry. Number 7, Mr. Vigil, through his actions of transporting heavy equipment into and out of the property located at 123C State Road 240, has created a safety issue for motorists and the public on State Road 240, which is a narrow two-lane roadway. Number 8, through testimony by Mr. Vigil's father-in-law, which Mr. Vigil refuted, Mr. Vigil provides employment to 10 to 20 individuals exceeding the cottage industry threshold, which indicates no more than 5 persons, not immediate members, or not members of the immediate family, may be employed. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, number 9, Commissioners, Mr. Vigil failed to demonstrate that he is operating within the parameters of the cottage industry. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, if you choose to reinstate Mr. Vigil's ability to store equipment, I respectfully request that you impose conditions on Mr. Vigil as follows. Number 1, limiting the amount of equipment that can be stored on the property to not exceed 4 pieces of equipment to the choosing of Mr. Vigil as to which 4 pieces of equipment he desires to retain on the site. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I want to add that I did not use any table, chart, or graph to pick the number of 4, and that was arbitrary on my part. Number 2, the chosen 4 pieces of equipment shall be located at the rear of the property as shown on the aerial imagery at all times. Number 3, the idling of equipment shall be limited to no more than 10 minutes and shall be performed at the rear of the property away from the residence of Ms. Mundarmi and Ms. Lucas. Number 4, the transportation of equipment into and out of the site shall be restricted to hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday, with no activity on Sunday. And number 5, Protégé excavation shall employ no more than 5 persons, not members of the immediate family. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that concludes staff's presentation. If you have any questions, I'm open to any questions.
Commissioner Black. Thanks, Chairman. The section 3.4.2 that allows for revocation, that was part of the 2005 ordinance also?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blackmore, it was not.
Is that a problem, Randy? Because we're enforcing a revocation provision of our land use regs that were not in effect at the time the original permit was issued.
I understand. Mr. Vigil, was there a similar provision in effect at the time? What, you might let me take a look at the copy of those land use regs that were in effect at that time, and then I'll take that under advisement and take a look at it.
Anything close to that?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blankenhorn, Mr. Otto, it is my belief that there is nothing within the ordinance of 2005-10 that provided this ability of the planning director.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, the issue that this raises is essentially, at the core of all land use decisions, is that ability for a county commission to have the ability to enforce the land use conditions. So that ability is provided by state law, but I just want to take a look at how we would get there. I do think it is best to get there under the laws that were applicable when this use was created.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, if you issue a permit and then the permit has, the permittee has broken requirements, then there obviously has to be something under the law that allows you to revoke. I'm sorry I asked the question, but were there any specifics at all attached to the original cottage industry permit?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blankenhorn, Commissioners, there were not. As a matter of fact, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I stand before you today, I do not have a copy of the cottage industry application that was approved to Mr. Vigil at the time. We were only able to find the county clerk's printout that we made reference to dating back to March of 2008.
Okay. Right, well, everybody recognizes that we greatly improved our land use rates since 2005, and we keep much better records of what's been issued. So, but
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Blankenhorn, if I may also, by no fault of the planning department or by no fault of no one, I just want to make sure that we are aware and the audience is aware that by state statute, we're only required to hold on to records for 3 years. So if we did have any information, it's been more than 3 years and so we disposed of those records.
And none of this would come up under our new regs because we have much more specific requirements for cottage industries.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that is correct. And under effective approximately 3 years now, with the assistance of Mr. Sanchez and Mr. Pereira's members of the planning department, we are now electronically filing all home occupation permits.
Wow, that's great. So we can digitally search them and all. But we are still stuck with what we have today.
Need to get a flashlight.
Okay, Chairman, thank you.
Back to this.
I apologize. Okay, back to it. So, thank you for your recommendations. When you say that limiting to 4 pieces, do those include trailers or is that motorized pieces of equipment that you had in mind for?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blankenhorn, Commissioners, as in motorized equipment.
Okay. And the 5 employees is a little tricky because does that mean employees that just end up reporting to the house and picking up equipment? Or, can they be out doing other things? In other words, if Mr. Vigil's business picks up again and hopefully he gets to hire more people?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blankenhorn, and Commissioners, the question that you're asking me is the same question that I struggle with. How do I apply this portion of the regulation to Mr. Vigil? Mr. Vigil and I have had discussions and to the tune of where Mr. Vigil no longer has his employees come and park on the property. So that's helped, but nonetheless, some of his employees still need to come onto the property to pick up pieces of equipment.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? So, Mr. Vigil has a job in Second. Employees would report from the job once everything is mobilized and he's transferred from Angel Fire to here or however he does that. So he could have 20 employees, but they're not at this site, so I'm confused about it.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, that is my very struggle. That is my very struggle as to how to monitor or how to admonish or punish an individual by his own success. Happens to have 20 employees who are not coming over to his property but are over at the job site. I don't think that would be a fair application of the regulation to Mr. Vigil.
Okay, if that is an option, then that could possibly be worded different than your recommendation on item 5.
So noted.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
So I found the vehicle with the commercial bin Is this considered a commercial vehicle, this red truck? That would be, I'm asking both Mr. Vigils.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Commissioner O'Donnell, I believe that it all falls to interpretation, and that is a huge struggle that we in the planning department have had. I'll give my response to you first and say, yes, absolutely, that equipment could be used for commercial purposes. On the other hand, Mr. Vigil will probably jump all over this particular response, but Mr. Vigil has indicated, well, some of the equipment I use for agricultural purposes. So that has been a really fine line for us in the planning department to separate what is actually used for commercial purposes and what is used for agricultural purposes. Under the regulations at the time in 2005 and under present regulations today, agricultural use is exempt from basically the land use code. The only thing that would be applicable is if the individual wants to construct a building on there, and if it exceeds the thresholds of a building permit, then absolutely they come in and get a building permit. But it's all subject to interpretation, Commissioner O'Donnell. My interpretation is that yes, this equipment could be used for commercial purposes, but Mr. Vigil's address his portion or his belief.
So that truck, I believe, is a 1991 Peterbilt. I believe the weight on it is somewhere around 12,000 pounds. My dually weighs 12,000 pounds with the toolboxes on it. I believe the horsepower class is the same. I have not used that for my commercial use. That's used to take my trash bin to and from the landfill, and I've also used it to haul cows. For my grandfather passed away, but for the family's cows, that's what I use that truck for. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Whether, I don't know what.
And my other question, I didn't see your tax bills paid. Are you being taxed as a residential area or as a non-residential?
That's a question that I find very hard to interpret. So if you recall from 2016, the 5,000 square foot shop at Camino Caballo, when I bought that building, I had to get a commercial appraisal, which was, almost 5,000 bucks. I had to do to get a commercial well, all kinds of stuff that said it was commercial. Well, then I was not granted a commercial permit. So I asked the tax department whether I was going to get money back, being that I was paying commercial taxes on it and not residential taxes, and I was told that the tax rate was exactly the same. So I'm sorry I can't answer that question, but I'm not sure my property, where my home is at, I'm not sure if I am getting charged commercially or if I'm getting charged residentially. I would, what I would think would be right was a portion would get taxed residentially and a portion would get taxed commercially, but I can't honestly, with any type of knowledge, give you a correct answer to that question.
So Mr. Vigil, I'm just wondering why property tax bill is not included in here so we can see if it's residential or non-residential.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners and Commissioner O'Donnell, planning staff can get that document for you here in just a few minutes. That was something that was overlooked by me as the planning director, and I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Ms. Montgomery when she bought her property?
2005.
Anything else, Mr. Vigil?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner. Just for the record, because we are recording this for purposes, I just want to add that Ms. Montgomery indicated 2005, just so we're clear on that.
Vice Chairman Vigil, are you chiming in?
I am, Mr. Chair. Excuse me for a second here. I think I'm ready to call for a vote.
Hold on just a second, there's one more step and then we might be at that point. As soon as Mr. Vigil planning closes, And the other Mr. Vigil will have closing comments. And then at that time, we can either go into executive session or we can call for the vote.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Commissioner O'Donnell, I have to ask our senior planner, Mr. Pereira, to obtain the assessor's printout that will indicate how this property is presently being assessed. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, planning staff has concluded their presentation, and we've given you our recommendation. We've also offered to you some potential findings of fact, and we've offered for you some potential conditions should you choose to overturn or award Mr. Vigil the ability to go ahead and store equipment on this property. Obviously, all is subject to amendment by you if you desire to amend it if you think it's supposed to.
Mr. Vigil. Mark, we can hear you whenever you're moving there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. So I would like to say some things regarding Mr. Edward Vigil's comments on the property. Ms. Lucas was stated many times as she was one of the complainants about the property. I have a letter in here, and it's also in your packet, that shows that now that the equipment has been parked at the rear of the property, that she has absolutely no problem with our day-to-day operations. I also have letters from everybody else except Miss Montgomery that adjoins our property that it says a lot of great things, and there was a lot of moving words in there that I was very happy to hear as far as me being a neighbor towards them. I also want to state that I have legally been granted a cottage industry license from 2008 and even this year. Until recently, it was denied. I'd also like to state when Ms. Montgomery purchased her home in 2005, it was a cottage industry that was operating out of the property that she purchased and still has equipment stored right next to her house. Who that belongs to, I'm not going to bring any names into it, but if you go out there for the site visit, you'll see. And that person is not being complained about, even though they're directly next door to her. And when they start their equipment up, I have not heard any testimony as far as that goes on complaining about their cottage industry or the use or storage of that equipment. Also on Mr. Vigil's, his 9 points saying why that the as planning director, he was denying the operation. I addressed every single one of those 9 points as far as storage of equipment, as far as hours of operation. If I'm driving my pickup in from coming back from dinner and it's a diesel pickup and I drive it in, she hears it and complains about the dust or the noise. I'm sorry, but that's a personal matter. We don't operate at night, and if we are, we're out in the middle of nowhere. We're not operating out of that yard. All the equipment, I'd like to say, is stored in the back. The only time, twice this year, which I stated, which she complained about both times, I stated why it was parked back there. Putting gravel back there, I am fine with doing that. I am more than happy to do that. This is my last chance in operating my business here in Taos. That's all there is to it. If you guys deny me, where would you go? Do you want me to move to Albuquerque and operate out of there? I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
And a clarity of your business is not actually operating at 123C.
Correct, sir.
That's where your home is and where you store your equipment to do Protégé excavation work wherever you are hired.
Yes, sir. And I'd like to say again, this isn't going to hurt anybody except me. Cattle trailers will be there, horse trailers will be there, my horses will be there. There's going to be vehicles, personal or not, driving in and out of the property, and it's not going to change anything. All it's going to do is hurt me as a company and as a business. After the 2016, I have, as you can see, and as Mr. Vigil can vouch if he would like to, I have greatly decreased the operations. I would also like to state again, the employees that show up, they'll show up and they'll get a service truck that can carry diesel in or has an air compressor or something like that. They'll park their vehicle there, they'll start up the service truck. It'll idle for 5 to 10 minutes to get warm, depending on what the weather conditions are. And then it'll go to the job site, and then you don't see it again until the end of the day. I don't run a gravel pit out of that property. I don't understand how vehicles are driving in and out of there all day long. If anything, we go to the job site, we work, and we come, the equipment comes back to the house. As far as Mr. Vigil's recommendation on having 4 pieces of equipment that I'm allowed to store on the property, I want to thank him very much, because under the current regulations, you can have 3. So I'm very thankful that I'm allowed to have 4. And like I said, a backhoe and a dump truck and a trailer was considered 3 before. That's the way I started, way back when, and I'm being held to the regulations of today. And I would like to state again, and I would like to read this again, because I believe this is a very important paragraph. In 2008, Protégé excavation was granted approval for a cottage industry under the existing parameters at that time. The business is still in compliance under the original parameters that the approval was granted. If Protégé excavation is now being held to the new parameters of the updated land use regulations, then most of the businesses in Taos County would be considered non-conforming. I believe that if Taos County pursues the penalization of Protégé excavation, Taos County must then go after all of the non-conforming uses and non-permitted uses that have commenced after 1997, and there are quite a few in the county. Is Taos County going to penalize all the businesses, or is the Taos County Planning and Zoning Office only going to target those businesses with 1 or more neighbors raising concern? This is not a consistent enforcement of the land use regulations. I feel that Protégé excavation is being discriminated against and fair play is not being followed. I thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vigil. Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Thanks, Chairman. Steve, I root for your success. I know how hard you work, and I know how good your work is. But I do worry that it expanded, from the original cottage industry, that regardless of the fact that we don't know the exact dates, clearly you got more successful and more equipment was put on the property. And I share the other Mr. Vigil's concern that does change the character from residential. And, I worry about decisions like starting up the semi at 1:15 in the morning. I don't know how that could happen. So, with all that in mind, I am inclined to go with Planning Department's suggestions for adding some reasonable conditions to your permit, like actually limiting the number of vehicles you can store and strictly enforcing the 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, whatever it was, whatever hours we can agree upon, so that you don't end up, waking your neighbor up at 1:15. And would you be open to these kinds of conditions to be placed on a permit?
Yes, sir, I would. As stated by Mr. Edward Vigil, I moved all the equipment to the very rear of the yard. The 2 times other than the 1:15 in the morning, and as it's stated in there, just so you know, July 26th was my birthday, so you can probably imagine what I was doing at the time, and with the frustration that I had with Miss Montgomery, you could imagine my anger towards her.
That's how you celebrated? That was
Well, at the time, I'll tell you, it felt pretty good. But I'm not going to come in before you and lie to you. I'm going to be straightforward and honest with you. I bought a commercial building to store some of the equipment and things like that. That was denied. Here I am now. I'm out with, and I want to be very clear. And if you guys remember what I said in that 2016 hearing, this is an issue in Taos County. And at the time, I wasn't coming with you asking for approval of the commercial use permit at 35 Camino Caballo. I stated that there was a very big problem within Taos County, And I did everything that Mr. Vigil asked of me to do, but when neighbors come up and they have a problem with it, then they're allowed to complain. I tried to adequately identify and have an answer for any of those complaints, which I did, and I was denied. I did what I was supposed to do according to the law and according to planning and zoning, and I was denied. I had to downsize from 17 employees down to 5. How does that help Taos County? And how does that help me as a company? Now, I'm being threatened to completely have no part in Taos County to operate a business. I don't understand in any world how someone that grew up here in Taos, that grew up around all this, and you're saying I'm a victim of my own success. I am a victim of my own success because I'm going to be kicked out of doing anything on my own property because I was successful. And the only answer is to go buy a $500,000 piece of property and then spend another $250,000 putting a building on it. I want to state, why I'm the only one having to follow the rules. And within the town of Taos, there are areas that are zoned commercial, and now just recently, you guys have an area for me. Well, guess where that area is? It's way out on Highway 64 in the middle of nowhere, where things can get robbed, where glass can get broken, and equipment can get vandalized. I do not own a gravel pit. I'm operating out of my house right now because I have no other choice, because my commercial building that I bought, that I spent all that money on, went to nothing. And it's not your fault. I'm going to tell you, but I'm looking at you guys to come up with a solution for it. Because where is a small business supposed to operate? Because you guys have made the regulations so stringent that no one can operate. If my son came back from college tomorrow and I gave him a backhoe, a dump truck, and a trailer, he has to get a special use permit. He cannot operate because that is now commercial. What does that do for greenhouses? What does that do for all these small business people that want to stay in Taos and be successful? You guys have put the rope there and just waited for us to hang ourselves, because if in any way we're successful at all, we're going to be punished for it. And I'm not, here, I can limit the use of the equipment. I can keep 5 pieces there, I can keep 10 pieces there, it doesn't matter. My point is, she's always going to complain. It doesn't matter, she's going to complain about warming up the trucks, my dogs, my kids. You heard the things she had to come up here and complain about. It had nothing to do with my business. So I'm asking for your help. I've gotten with Mr. Vigil, I've gotten with your attorney. In 2016, I was hoping that we were going to be able to come up with a good solution for small businesses to be able to expand and be successful without having to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars of commercial property. And that question still has not been answered. And I'm happy to be a part of the solution instead of always saying, it's that guy right there, it's that guy, let's go after him. Because I want you guys to know this, and you can ask, the attorney, this is a huge legal deal right here. What happens when you guys come after me and you say you can't do it, but you don't go after everybody else in Taos County? And I'm not trying to open up the door, and I'm not going to go and threaten with hiring a lawyer and coming after you guys. I want to come up with a solution for small businesses in Taos County, and everybody's taking the easy way out. Everybody's voting on the variance, or everybody's voting on this or that. They're not looking at the problem that we have and coming up with a solution. And I'm asking for a solution. Thank you very much.
Mr. Vigil, you're closing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I recognize that you had closed the public hearing. You asked Mr. Vigil to come up and give additional comments. Ms. Montgomery has requested if there's any possibility she could come up and speak a couple more words before we move forward.
I have no objection.
Thank you. I do want to say that some of the things he just said were not the truth. Before September 12th, there were trucks in and out all day. And I'm not talking about pickup trucks. And I've never complained about pickup trucks heating up in the morning, ever. I've only complained about those big pieces of equipment and semis that go in and out that stir up dust, noise, diesel, whatever. And also, he was speaking of the fact that there's other industries like his. Well, during the Planning Commission, Mr. Vigil, Edward Vigil here said, they aren't the size he is. So it has made a significant impact on my house, more than any of the other neighbors, because those trucks run on my side, not on theirs. And as far as Kristen goes, she stays up till 3 or 4 in the morning, and she sleeps all day. She said she hears nothing when she sleeps, nothing. So those are my rebuttals, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Romero. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Montgomery, I have a couple of questions. So you live off of State Road 240?
Yes.
What is the proximity of your house to State Road 240?
Okay, the Gutierrez's live in front of me, and then there's like a empty lot, and then my house, and then my property runs back to Kristen Lucas's house also.
But your residence alone is like how close to State Road 240?
I'm not really good at estimating that sort of thing, but
Do you hear any of the noise that is occurring on State Road 240?
no, not really. I mean, it's very distant sounding.
I'm guessing 200 yards.
200 yards.
Maybe that's right. And I do have one question. I have no idea, and even both of my friends that came with me, what he's talking about another company in that area with big equipment. I mean, on the left side of my house, as you face it, is nothing but a field that Danny Martinez brings his cows down to. And he had his cows over on the other property before Steve purchased that property. But I don't know what he's talking about other equipment, nor do my friends. I've never seen any other big equipment, to be very honest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Commissioner O'Donnell, Mr. Rudy Padilla, senior planner, went over and obtained the Taos County assessor printout. Mr. Vigil's property, Commissioners, was being assessed as residential. It's not being assessed as commercial.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, we have given you our recommendation, but I just want to add one closing comment. With all due respect to Mr. Vigil, Mr. Stephen Vigil, doing this in his Protégé excavation, obviously we want him to succeed. We're here before you today, obviously, because of the complaints that our department has received. I cannot turn a deaf ear on the complaints, and this is why we're here to have a public hearing before you. With all due respect to Mr. Vigil, and I quote, "Why I'm the only one following the rules," end of quote. Mr. Vigil is not the only one that is following the rules. All the rules are applicable to all individuals of Taos County. It just happens that Mr. Vigil has received the complaints, and we did our best to investigate the complaints. We structured this particular hearing based on the land use regulations, which we believe allowed us to come before you at a public hearing. We went before the board, the Planning Commission. I exercised what I believe was my interpretation of the regulations under the land use code to revoke the ability to store equipment on the property based on the complaints, not my arbitrary decision to say that I solely chose Mr. Vigil and went after him. I have no personal vendetta with Mr. Vigil. I believe that he operates a really good business, does really good for the community. But again, I'm acting solely on complaints that were based on his particular business, not on any other businesses.
Thank you. Commissioner Blankenhorn.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I'm proud of the planning department. I think you guys did a really good job on this. I'm gonna make a motion, see what happens, make a motion to reinstate the cottage industry permit with the conditions. Hey, Mark. We could just hear you buzzing around a little bit, so yeah, with the conditions that you have suggested, but with some refinement of the employee language, so that Mr. Vigil is not limited in total to 5 employees that aren't family members, but somehow that limitation is enforced on coming to that property every morning or on a regular basis.
I will second with some language that I've jotted down here with the existing.
Just real quick, just a point of clarity, we should indicate, we have closed and ended the public meeting, and we're moving on to item B, which
Well, we
is...
did that before the appellate, his closing remark, and Mr. Vigil got his closing remark. Okay, so my suggestions are, number 1, to insert motorized after pieces of. In number 3, it's difficult, I have a diesel truck, and sometimes 10 minutes is enough. If it's 20 below, it's going to take a little bit longer than that. But if it's placement of the equipment, that's more important than the 10 minutes. On transportation of equipment into and out of site will be restricted to, it's tough at 8 o'clock because I imagine his jobs start at 8, so I would suggest 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. That gives him an hour before a normal work day, if people have normal work days, I don't think that exists anymore. And an hour afterwards, and Monday through Saturday. And as for number 5, I would like to insert the language, Protégé excavation shall allow no more than 5 employees to park their personal vehicles during work days and shall be parked in the front of the property. That way they're nowhere near this Montgomery at 7 a.m.
I'll amend my motion to include all of those with reasons.
Mr. Chairman, I have additional
Okay.
amendments. I really believe we need to go in executive session to hammer out these conditions rather than continuing to amend motions and add to
It should be
the...
stated in front of the public, so.
Well, I
might
still
say-
think we need to go in executive session so we have them listed correctly.
If I could finish, so those in seconding, those are my suggestions. Now the discussion. Would you like to go into executive session?
Yes.
We postpone the motion as made by Commissioner Blankenhorn and seconded by myself with my suggested conditions.
And Mr.
And I need a second to go into executive session.
Don't we have to vote on the motion in a second?
We do.
You have to table it.
Well, we don't have to. Any other discussion?
So, Mr. Chairman, I would still like to do a site visit. I think it's very important for us to see the site surroundings in order to make a qualified decision here today. I'm pretty familiar with State Road 240, and there are many residences, many areas on State Road 240, off of State Road 240, a lot of farmers that have large equipment, a lot of contractors in that area that have large pieces of equipment. How is our decision today going to affect those? Are we going to have to go after them now? Because we've done the same with Mr. Vigil. I mean, I understand the fact that you move into a neighborhood, an area, and you love the peace and tranquility. It's within a farm area. There's a lot of farms. So there's going to be a lot of equipment. There's going to be a lot of tractors. There's going to be noise, a lot of noise. You live immediately off of State Road 240. There's sirens, there are ambulances, there's fire departments that rush through that road on a daily basis. I really feel, Mr. Chairman, that I myself would really like to look at this site in order for me to make a qualified decision here today.
Okay, we're in the discussion phase following the motion in a second. Commissioner O'Donnell, would you wish to add anything to the conditions at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to go into executive session, and I don't feel like I should be forced to add these conditions at this point. And I'm going to ask you to table this motion until we have an executive session.
Commissioner, can I clarify? Did I ask you, would you like to add? I don't know how else to do that.
Well, you're implying we're not going to do site visit. We're not going to go to the
Second, let's vote on it.
No, I'm not going to vote on it. I mean, okay, you want me to add to it? All right. That he places gravel in the back, that he's allowed 10 pieces of equipment.
So 6 would be placing gravel in traffic area.
In the back where he stores his equipment so he can get it in and out. That he create an additional barrier wall in front of Ms. Montgomery's property that would be tall enough so she doesn't see the tops of these semis. And a sound barrier wall if possible. Since he testified that the garbage bin is his own.
Commissioner O'Donnell has the floor.
Since he testified that the garbage bin is his own personal property, then we cannot mandate he move that. However, if you have a voluntary compliance that he move that bin away from her property. And I had wanted to do a site visit because it had been brought up there were ingress and egress issues going into his property, and I wanted to see if it was possible for him to kind of widen that turnout.
But you understand how it works. If the motion doesn't pass, then you can do a motion to do a site visit, and we'll see. You know, we do this on a majority basis.
So, Mr. Chairman, I do believe those would be the additions I would request.
Respectfully, Commissioner, I agree with everything except for constructing a sound barrier wall.
How about just a visual barrier wall? There is reference to a
There's
gate.
restrictions to height
Well,
of
he
any
comes in
kind of
variance.
fence or wall that are covered in the land use regs. So he's already committed, as long as he's in compliance with land use regs, to construct a fence wall for Mr. Vigil.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Commissioner O'Donnell, in regard to your motion about constructing, or not your motion, your recommendation, in regard to your recommendation about constructing a barrier wall, with all due respect, Ms. Montgomery's home is a 2-story home. She would be up on her second floor looking down on the properties, and we're probably, I'm going to guesstimate, for this barrier wall to be at least equal in height to her second floor, to her second story, so she would not be able to see the tops of the equipment or the pieces of the equipment on the property. So that is really not an attainable request.
I was not talking to the height of her second story, but the height of the semi-trucks. So if she's on the first level, she doesn't see them. But my question is, that gate still there? You said you put that garbage bin to block a gate. Is that gate still there?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's the function of that gate? Whose gate is it?
That's my gate.
And why do you have that gate that goes to her property?
So that gate was there when I bought the house.
So you can be on record, please.
Thank you.
So, is there a wall where that gate is?
So there's a fence. It's made with 1x6 rough cut lumber and railroad ties. Now, where the gate is, that gate was constructed by Roy and Chris Torres before I bought the house. And then since then, I've extended that fence another 150 feet towards Miss Lucas's house. It passes Miss Montgomery's house and it goes about halfway between Miss Montgomery's house and Miss Lucas's house. And I built that fence on request of Miss Montgomery.
At what height?
Is the gate,
There is a gate still there, and the gate was constructed by the owners before I bought it.
is the gate, is there a barrier wall? Is there a fence in front of that gate?
Yes, ma'am.
The same as the one that you've shown in the picture?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Commissioner Blankenhorn, do you accept the suggestion of adding item 6, placing gravel in the vehicle storage area for dust control? And item 7, to move the existing garbage bin to an agreed placement of Mr. Vigil and Ms. Montgomery.
Do you?
Mr. Chairman, these are not, this is before the whole body. It is not up to any commissioner to agree or not agree.
I'm asking him
No,
to
it's
amend
not,
his
not-
motion, Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well,
So the way
it
it
doesn't
works,
work that way. We should take these amendments separately.
that is the way it works, because we have a motion and we have a second on the table. Appreciate your suggestions, and I will amend my motion, which is on the table, to include your suggestion for adding gravel. The trash bin, I don't know, does anybody care about the trash bin? I'm not gonna touch the trash bin, okay? So we have a motion with, to reinstate again the cottage industry permit, and we have conditions that have been placed on that, and Edward would like to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blankenhorn. I'd just like a friendly amendment to your motion. You indicated to reinstate the cottage industry permit. Cottage industry permit was never revoked. The ability to store equipment on the property is what was revoked.
My bad, I apologize, yes, and so it is a motion just to reinstate the ability to store a specific number of pieces of equipment, and that's that. That's my motion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Audio.
on Mr. Blankenhorn's motion, there's also been a suggestion or a proposed amendment by Commissioner O'Donnell to increase the number of pieces of equipment, so that we should resolve for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. This is critical, right? This is why we're here today.
But
So let's get the, let's get the piece of equipment straight. I know Commissioner Romero, you want to go out there. You may yet get your chance to go out there, but not yet. We still have to vote on the motion. If the motion is denied, you can vote no on the motion because you want to go out there. We'll see what happens.
And Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Blankenhorn, with all due respect, you're making all these suggestions without even looking at the site.
Yeah,
Based
I
on the
understand.
testimony given to us today in the hearing.
And it's really that we can do
People to
that.
look at the
I
site.
understand that that is your opinion on the matter. I happen to think that
We've never worked this way before.
we've done made lots of decisions without site visits. Personally,
This is more clear.
since I have the floor, personally, you know, the maps, the overhead views, all of the testimony today are sufficient for me to make a motion, which I'm doing. But as to the equipment, do we want to be very specific here in terms of the actual pieces of equipment that we're going to allow?
I just asked that the word motorized be put into
So where we're at is 4 motorized pieces of equipment.
Mr. Chairman, I called for 10.
Yeah, but it ain't your motion, so.
Well, these are my suggestions.
Okay. All right.
And we're still discussing this. He has indicated that, you know, he told us what he needed. You give him a smaller amount, it still restricts him. It still causes him to not operate functionally. So You know, these are arbitrary numbers, but he's given you testimony that that's how much he needs, 10 motorized vehicles.
His testimony was 4.
No, it wasn't. It was 10. When I asked him,
Not counting the trailers and his motorized vehicles.
no, well, let's have him clarify that.
Thank you. So at the beginning, when I first started, I recognized the number 10 twice. When I first started in 2008, I had at least 10 pieces of equipment then. To function properly, 4 would not be sufficient. That would give me a dump truck, a backhoe, 1 service truck, and maybe a grader. And depending on the emergencies that we have, emergency water line dig-ups, things like that, that amount of equipment is not adequate enough for me to function properly. So 10 would be a number that would be more adequate for me to function properly as a business. And that would be motorized equipment, not trailers. If we got into trailers, say I do use the same trailer to pick up hay sometimes that I use to pull a tractor or something like that, and then it's going to go on what I'm using it for. Is there any other questions for me?
How many motorized vehicles are there now?
There's 4.
Not your personal.
There's 2 transport semi-trucks in the rear. There's 1 dump truck in the rear. There's a backhoe parked back there. There's 1 small excavator back there. There's 2 service trucks there. And then depending on how you categorize the vehicle that transports my trash, if that's commercial or not, that would be another piece. So I would say right now there's about 9 or 10.
All right, well, mine's
A legal issue, I believe, regarding the site visit that I would like our attorney to advise on in an executive session. So at this time, Mr. Blunt, you either withdraw your motion and I will second if you choose to do so. We'll go into executive session because already, there's a gray area here and it's getting worse. So,
well,
Mr. Chair,
Vice Chair Davis.
let the process follow. There's a motion and a second, call to vote, and if there's no vote in support, then somebody can make a motion to executive session. There's nothing on the agenda that says you have to do a site visit.
but thank you, Commissioner Gallegos. I will withdraw my motion or go into executive session since we have run into this issue. I was inclined to just go with Edward's recommendation for 4 motorized vehicles, but
I will withdraw my second. Do I entertain a motion to go into executive session under the exemption of 10 can I please finish?
Go ahead.
Under the exemption of the Open Meetings Act, 10-15-1, H3 allows us to go into executive session for the deliberation of public body in connection with administrative adjudicatory procedures. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Motion and second, clerk call the roll.
Commissioner Romero?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Blankenham?
yes.
Vice Chair Gallegos?
No.
Chairman Bender?
Yes. Upstairs. I entertain a motion to come back into open session.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Clerk call the roll.
Commissioner Romero?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Blankenham?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gallegos?
Yes.
Chairman Bender?
Yes. Mr. Vigil, question on behalf of the commission.
Mr. Chairman.
You've heard Mr. Vigil say that 4 motorized commercial vehicles is not enough. for his needs at that property. Do you have a recommendation of something in between what was spoken previous by the commission of his ask of 10 and what your recommendation of 4, so as not to affect the integrity of the neighborhood, which is the basis of this appeal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. First of all, let me just clarify again and state for the record that the number 4 that I chose was really just a number that I at the time felt comfortable. That was basically what I took into account. There was no land use code or any document that I used as a guide to make that determination. I do want to correct something that Mr. Vigil stated, and he indicated that under the new code that you would be allowed up to 3 vehicles. That's not correct. Under the new code, under the land use regulations, anyone who applies for a new home occupation is strictly prohibited or restricted to no more than 2 vehicles associated with the home occupation may be parked or stored on the property, unless it can be demonstrated that the additional vehicles are garaged and that they do not create an adverse impact on the neighborhood and the surrounding character. Therein, obviously, lies your question to me.
Okay. As a suggestion, food for thought. If the number of vehicles stored is this number, but the number of vehicles that can actually be being used at one time is a smaller number, is that something that meets what your statement just?
I vote, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Obviously, I would just like to take a minute and refer you to the image that we have on the monitor right at this moment, if I may. I'd like to refer you to that image, and let me take the position and say that Mr. Vigil again has relocated a good portion of the equipment to the rear of the property. I believe that Mr. Vigil testified or alluded to the fact that he had on-site right now costing 9 to 10 pieces of equipment. I believe that he stated that.
Including trailers and other.
I believe that was what he intended. I'm not sure if he intended to his comment to say motorized vehicles, but I believe that he alluded to 9 or 10 vehicles. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, really, in looking at and look at the whole scale of this item of this hearing today, the only reason we're here is because of the complaints, and because we believe as a result of the complaints that the neighborhood character has been altered. If Mr. Vigil, by his own testimony, is able to keep those 9 to 10 vehicles in the rear of the property, idles those vehicles in the rear of the property, does not bring the vehicles near Ms. Montgomery's home and idles the vehicles there, starts the vehicles there, or parks the vehicles there,
Especially at 1:15.
especially at 1:15 in the morning, I would say that the 9 to 10 vehicles are probably acceptable. However, Mr. Vigil has demonstrated that he's brought vehicles close to Ms. Montgomery's home and has created an impact on her livelihood as she has testified. And so it's a tough position, because if we strictly adhere to parking those vehicles in the rear of the property as demonstrated on this photograph, on this aerial image, I would feel comfortable in saying that 9 to 10 would be acceptable. But if he's looking at bringing some of those vehicles close and parking some of those near Ms. Montgomery's property, I will certainly dig my heels in and say 4 pieces of motorized equipment. I hope that provides a little bit of clarification for you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vigil, we're looking at about 3 acres, the total size of the property.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Romero, Commissioners, that is correct. Approximately 2.3 acres or just shy of 3 acres on that area.
And was it the intent of the owner of the property to construct some sort of a shed or storage area for all of these vehicles?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, Romero, Commissioners, in discussions with a past county attorney, because we've had discussions with Mr. Vigil, but we brought him into the planning department, we did advise Mr. Vigil, based on the existing land use code that I just read to you, that basically states that it may be parked or stored on the property unless it can be demonstrated that the additional vehicles are garaged and they do not create an adverse impact on the neighborhood and surrounding character. We had initially discussed this with Mr. Vigil about the possibility of constructing some type of garage or building there that would house a lot of this equipment or some of this equipment, but that's as far as it went. We were never able to meet some kind of agreement or with Mr. Vigil and the ability to construct a building there to park the equipment in.
So, Mr. Chairman, is it proper to ask then of our attorney whether we can ask Mr. Vigil whether he intends to construct anything on there, or can we make it as part of this agreement?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Commissioner Romero, obviously you could certainly ask the county attorney for his input, but obviously the question always that comes to my eyes, with all due respect to Ms. Montgomery and to all, are you creating an undue hardship on the applicant by requiring to build a building on there?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, as part of this proceeding before you today, I don't think you can place a condition such as the construction of a standalone building. What we've got is a cottage industry that was approved, and the key factor in that test is that it doesn't change the residential character of the neighborhood. So what's before you, I don't think you can place a condition on that would allow a construction of a building. He certainly has that option to come back with that proposal, as well as he could ask for a special use and other changes. But what's before you is what amount of vehicles used on that property would change the character of the residential neighborhood.
Commissioner Blankenship.
Well, will you entertain a motion?
I would like to state a motion.
You want to state it?
I would like to make a motion
Okay, I'll let you do that.
that we reinstate Mr. Vigil's ability to store equipment with the following conditions. First, being limiting the amount of equipment to 10 pieces, as he requested, that can be stored on the property not to exceed 10 motorized commercial equipment pieces, the choosing of Mr. Vigil. Number 2, that they shall be located at the rear of the property as shown in the aerial imagery at all times except when moving. Number 3, the idling of equipment shall be limited to no more than 10 minutes and shall be performed at the rear of the property away from the residence of Ms. Montgomery, and no more than 4 running at any one time. 4, the transportation of equipment into and out of the site shall be restricted to the hours of 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. unless emergency, at which point Mr. Vigil would notify planning of any infraction within a specified time. And number 5, Protégé excavation shall not allow more than 5 employees to park personal vehicles on the property during work hours. Number 6, Mr. Vigil will place gravel in the vehicle storage area and travel area to serve as dust abatement. Commissioners, are there any other conditions that you would like added before I finish my motion?
I would like to just change one thing, which is the 10 pieces of equipment are just 10 pieces of equipment. So, you know, you can have some motorized, you can have some trailers, whatever you want, but it's 10 pieces, not 10 pieces of motorized equipment, then you have 10 pieces of motorized plus trailers, and so that's my suggestion. I don't know if you'll accept it.
Well, that's why we said 10 pieces of equipment and no more than 10, because he said he fluctuates with depending on the job. That was my motive of thinking.
So the motion is 10 pieces of equipment?
Correct, but only 4 running at one time.
So, Mr. Chairman, is there going to be some sort of a definition as to what these pieces of equipment are? What if he brings a large tractor or a large truck with a trailer that's going to pull that tractor?
Well, my motion stated that it would be no more than 10 pieces of equipment Of that, no more than 10 being motorized, because as he stated, he brings in what he needs for the specific job that he's been hired for.
So these vehicles have to be associated then with the business.
That's what he's been doing, and so that's why I stated the motion that I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Further discussion?
Can I just be clear on the motorized? I thought it was 10 motorized and then
Up to 10 motorized.
other equipment like trailers that aren't motorized can still be stored there.
I just used his statement of being 10 pieces of equipment. Any further discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Romero?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Blankenhorn?
Yes?
Vice Chair Gagos?
Yes.
Chairman Bender?
Yes.